I sat at the dinner table, my fork hovering over the plate of spaghetti that my mom, Linda, had prepared. The familiar smell wafted through the air, but tonight it felt different, tinged with an unshakable tension. I glanced at Mark, my new stepfather, who sat across from me, a charming smile plastered on his face. He looked the part, handsome, well-groomed, the kind of guy who could easily charm anyone. But there was something about him that gave me pause. Maybe it was the way his eyes flickered to my mom, searching for approval. Or the way he laughed a bit too loudly at his own jokes. Mom seemed happy. I had to give her that. She was radiant, her hair falling softly on her shoulders, her laughter ringing out like music. But as I watched her, I couldn't help but notice the slight tension in her shoulders as Mark reached out to squeeze her hand. I could almost see the invisible lines of loyalty and conflict being drawn between us. "So, how was school today, Jake?" she asked, breaking the uneasy silence. "Fine," I replied, shrugging. "Just the usual." Mark leaned in, his eyes bright with interest. "You're a senior, right? Got any plans for after graduation?" I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. He was trying too hard. "I don't know yet. Maybe college, maybe a gap year. It's a lot to think about." He nodded, as if he understood the weight of my decisions. "You know, when I was your age, I took a year off to travel. It was the best decision I ever made." I forced a smile, but inside I was seething. I didn't want his advice. I wanted my mom back to myself, the one who didn't need a man to feel complete. As dinner progressed, the conversation flowed, but the underlying tension remained palpable. Every laugh felt forced, every smile a facade. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment of solitude. As I washed my hands, I stared at my reflection, searching for answers. Why did I feel like a stranger in my own home? Later that night, after the dishes were washed and the remnants of dinner cleared away, I retreated to my room. I tossed and turned, unable to shake the feeling of unease. Just as I started to drift off, I heard the soft murmur of voices drifting through the thin walls. Curious, I got up and crept toward the hallway, straining to listen. "Mark, you can't keep doing this," a woman's voice said, low and urgent. My heart raced as I recognized the tone, filled with tension and familiarity. Who was he talking to? I pressed my ear closer to the door, straining to catch more words. "Just a little longer," Mark replied, his voice smooth but tinged with something darker. "I promise it'll be worth it." My stomach churned, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Who was this woman? What were they discussing? I pulled away from the door, retreating back to my room, my mind racing with possibilities. What was my stepfather hiding? The next morning, I found myself sitting across from Ethan at our usual breakfast spot, a small cafe that served the best pancakes in town. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in my chest. "Dude, you look like you've seen a ghost," Ethan said, his eyes piercing through my facade. "I overheard something last night," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Like what?" Ethan leaned in, intrigued. I hesitated, trying to find the right words. Mark was on the phone with some woman. It sounded intimate. Ethan scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "You're just being paranoid, man. It's probably just a friend or something." "No, you don't get it. It felt wrong," I insisted, frustration bubbling within me. "Look, maybe you're just not used to having a stepdad around. Give it time," he suggested, but his words fell flat. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I needed to keep an eye on Mark. I needed to know if my instincts were right, even if it meant digging deeper into the web of secrets that seemed to be enveloping my family. As Ethan shifted the topic to a new video game, I found myself lost in thought, the weight of my suspicions heavy on my shoulders. The stage was set, and I couldn't ignore the impending storm brewing just beneath the surface. I stared at the receipt I had found tucked beneath a stack of old magazines on Mark's desk, my heart racing as I tried to make sense of it. A luxury hotel? Why would Mark be staying somewhere like that? The elegant script on the paper seemed to mock me, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to uncover. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal surge through me, As I replayed the snippets of his late-night phone call in my head, the sultry voice of the woman still echoing in my ears. "What are you hiding, Mark?" I muttered to myself, crumpling the receipt in my fist. I knew I had to dig deeper. Later that day, we decided to go out as a family, a seemingly innocent attempt to bond. As we sat around the table in a bustling restaurant, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the only one who sensed the tension in the air. Mark was uncharacteristically quiet, his eyes darting to his phone more often than to the conversation at hand. I watched him closely, scanning his face for any hint of guilt. "Everything okay, Mark?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, just some work stuff," he replied, his voice slightly strained as he quickly tucked his phone away. "Work at this hour?" I pressed, unable to contain my suspicions any longer. He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You know how it is, lots of responsibilities." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. How could Mom not see what was happening? Or was she choosing to ignore it? The doubt gnawed at me as I sat there, isolated in my own thoughts, surrounded by laughter and chatter that felt so far away. After dinner, I decided to follow Mark. My heart raced as I waited, my hands clammy against the steering wheel of my car. It was late, and the streets were quiet, shadows stretching ominously under the streetlights. I knew it was wrong to stalk him, but the need for answers outweighed my moral compass. I trailed him to a high-end restaurant, the kind of place I had only seen in magazines. My breath hitched as I parked a short distance away, watching him enter through the lavish glass doors. My stomach turned as I waited, half hoping I was wrong, half dreading the truth. Minutes felt like hours, and just when I was about to give up and drive home, I saw her. The same woman from the phone call, draped in an elegant dress that hugged her curves. She greeted Mark with a flirtatious smile, and my heart sank as I watched them embrace. "Jake?" I turned at the sound of a voice, my heart racing as I spun around to find Ethan standing behind me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you doing here?" I hissed, trying to keep my voice low. "I could ask you the same thing," he shot back, glancing at the restaurant. "Are you following Mark? Dude, this is crazy. I have to know, Ethan. I think he's cheating on Mom." I whispered urgently, my mind racing. Ethan's expression softened, and I could see the concern in his eyes. "Okay, but this isn't safe. What if he sees us?" "I don't care," I replied, my determination hardening. "I need to find out what's going on." We stayed hidden, watching as Mark and the woman laughed and shared intimate glances. Each moment felt like a knife twisting deeper into my gut. I wanted to confront him right then, to drag him out into the street and demand answers, but the fear of what I might learn held me back. "Jake, we should go," Ethan insisted, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't good for you." But I couldn't move. I was trapped in this moment, paralyzed by the weight of my discoveries. I had to see it through, to gather every piece of evidence against Mark. As I watched them lean closer, sharing secrets and laughter, I felt the ground beneath me shift. The family I thought I knew was crumbling, and I was helpless to stop it. "Let's go," I finally relented, my voice heavy with defeat. "But I won't give up. I'll find out the truth." Ethan nodded, and together we slipped away from the scene, shadows retreating into the night. As we drove home, the weight of my suspicions loomed larger than ever, and I knew this was only the beginning of a battle I was determined to win. I paced back and forth in my room, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and confusion. The image of my mother's trusting smile mixed with the unsettling memories of Mark's phone calls haunted me. Finally, I decided I had to confront her. She was my mother, and I needed her to believe me. I took a deep breath and knocked on her bedroom door. "Mom, can I come in?" I called out, my voice tinged with anxiety. "Of course, Jake," she replied, her tone warm and inviting. I opened the door, stepping into the cozy, familiar space that felt increasingly foreign to me. I sat on the edge of her bed, my heart pounding. "Mom, I need to talk to you about Mark," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. I could feel the weight of my words pressing down on me. She looked up from her book, her brow furrowing slightly. What about him? Is everything okay? No, it's not, I said, my frustration bubbling over. I overheard him on the phone the other night. He was talking to someone he seemed really close to. It didn't sound like a business call, Mom. I think hiding something from you. Jake, you must have misunderstood, she said, shaking her head, her expression a mix of concern and disbelief. Mark is a good man. He loves me. You know that, right? Do I? I snapped, the bitterness creeping into my voice. You just married him. How can you be so sure? I found a receipt for a hotel room, Mom. A hotel room. This isn't just paranoia, it's evidence. Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought I saw doubt flicker across her face. A receipt? Jake, that could be for anything. Maybe it's work-related or a surprise for me, she insisted, her voice growing defensive. Mom, please, I pleaded, desperation lacing my words. I need you to listen to me. I'm not trying to ruin your happiness, but I care about you. I care about our family. If he's lying to you, it could destroy everything. Linda sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. You're just a kid, Jake. You don't understand adult relationships. Mark has always been honest with me. You're only thinking the worst because you don't want to lose your dad's spot in my life. I recoiled at her words, the sting of her accusation burning deep. That's not fair. I'm not trying to take anyone's place. I'm just trying to protect you. As I watched her shake her head, a sense of helplessness washed over me. I felt as if I were fighting a losing battle against the one person I should have been able to trust the most. I'll find the truth, Mom. Even if it means doing it on my own, I muttered under my breath, feeling the resolve harden within me. The next day I returned to Mark's study, a place that had once felt so welcoming, but now felt like a den of secrets. I rifled through papers and books, my heart racing as I searched for something. Anything that would help me prove my suspicions. The room felt suffocating, each item a reminder of the lies that lingered in the air. Then, amidst a stack of papers, I stumbled upon an old photograph that made my heart drop. It was Mark, younger and smiling, with a woman who looked strikingly familiar. I squinted at the image, and then it hit me. Sarah. The name echoed in my mind like a warning bell. She was the woman I had seen in my dreams, the one who had haunted those late-night phone calls. I felt a surge of anger and determination. Mark had lied to us. He had brought this woman into our lives, and I needed to confront them both. Clutching the photo tightly, I left the study, my mind racing with the possibilities of what I would say and how I would expose their deceit. That night, as I lay in bed, I could hardly sleep. My mind was consumed with thoughts of Sarah and Mark. I envisioned their faces when they realized I knew the truth. I could almost hear their voices, the tension thick in the air as I laid it all out. I had to gather more evidence. I had to catch them in the act. With each passing moment, my resolve grew stronger. I would not let my family be torn apart without a fight. I was determined to uncover the truth and protect my mother from the man she trusted. As I closed my eyes, I whispered to myself, I will find the proof. The tension in the house was palpable when I confronted Mark that evening. I stood in the living room, heart racing, eyes locked on him as he lounged on the couch, the glow of the TV casting an eerie light across his face. Mark, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. He looked up, a hint of surprise in his expression. What's going on, Jake? You look like you've seen a ghost. There was a casualness in his tone that felt infuriatingly dismissive. I know about Sarah, I blurted out, my stomach twisting at the name. I heard you on the phone and I found the messages. You can't keep lying to us. Mark's demeanor shifted instantly. He straightened up, the playful glimmer in his eyes replaced by cold intensity. What exactly are you implying? He asked, his voice low and controlled. I'm not implying anything. I know you've been seeing her behind my mom's back. You think I wouldn't notice the late-night phone calls and the secret meetings? I pressed on, feeling a surge of adrenaline. Jake, you're just a kid with an overactive imagination, he retorted, leaning back into the couch, as if I were an annoyance he could easily brush aside. I love your mother. You have to understand, this is a serious accusation you're making. A serious accusation? I scoffed, feeling frustration bubbling to the surface. You think this is some kind of game for me? I'm trying to protect my mom from someone who's manipulating her. Mark's eyes narrowed. It's not manipulation. You're just looking for a reason to stir up drama. Teenagers do that. You know what? Maybe you should focus on your own life instead of trying to interfere in ours. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, rage and hurt swirling together. You're the one who's interfering. You came into our lives and ruined everything. And now you want to play the victim? Enough, he said, rising from the couch with a menacing calmness. You don't know what you're talking about. I've been nothing but good to you and your mother. This is how you repay me? I took a step back, suddenly aware of how alone I felt in that moment. You're just a liar, I spat. I won't let you hurt her anymore. Watch your mouth, Jake, he warned, his voice low and dangerous. You think you're the hero? You're just a troubled teenager looking for attention. You need to stop this before you go too far. With a heavy heart, I turned away, feeling the weight of his words sinking in. What if I was wrong? What if I was just being paranoid? But deep down, I knew I wasn't making this up. I had to prove it. The next day, feeling defeated yet resolute, I met Ethan at our usual spot after school. He could see the turmoil written all over my face. Dude, what happened? He asked, concern etched in his features. Mark denied everything, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He made me feel like I was the crazy one. I don't know what to do anymore. Ethan crossed his arms, his brow furrowing. We need to gather more evidence. If he's lying, we can't just let him get away with it. I nodded, feeling a spark of determination ignite within me. You're right. We have to catch him in the act. We can set up some cameras around the house. If he's really seeing Sarah, we'll have proof. Let's do it, Ethan said, his eyes lighting up with the thrill of the plan. We'll figure this out together. As we discussed the logistics, I felt a mix of hope and anxiety. This was risky, but I had to know the truth. I couldn't let Mark continue to manipulate my mother without any consequences. Later that evening, I approached the idea of placing hidden cameras with Ethan. We decided to start with the living room and the hallway leading to the guest room. We'll place them strategically so we won't suspect a thing, Ethan suggested, his voice brimming with excitement. But as we laid out our plan, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread creeping in. What if we were wrong? What if this only pushed my mother further away from me? I had already felt the strain in our relationship, and I feared that my obsession with uncovering Mark's secrets would only create a rift between us. I just want to protect Mom, I murmured, mostly to myself. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. I get it, man, but you need to be careful. This could blow up in your face if you're not cautious. I nodded, but the weight of what was to come felt heavier than ever. I was walking a tightrope, balancing my love for my mother and my need to expose the truth. As we set our plan in motion, I couldn't help but wonder if I was crossing a line that I couldn't uncross. As Jake and Ethan huddled around the laptop, anticipation mixed with dread. The dim light of the screen flickered across their faces, illuminating the tension in the room. Are you ready for this? Ethan whispered, his voice barely above a breath. Jake could only nod, a lump forming in his throat. This was it. The moment they had prepared for, but also the moment that could shatter everything he held dear. With a click, the first video file opened. They watched in silence as the living room appeared on screen, the mundane setting contrasting sharply with the gravity of the situation. Each second felt like an eternity as they scanned for any sign of betrayal. Then, without warning, the scene shifted to the guest room, Mark's clandestine domain. Jake's heart raced, pounding against his chest, as if trying to escape the impending truth. Suddenly Mark entered the frame, his demeanor casual, almost rehearsed. I can't believe I'm doing this, Jake muttered, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. Ethan shot him a quick glance, his eyes wide with disbelief. Then, as if scripted, Sarah emerged from the shadows, her presence electrifying the atmosphere. Jake felt the room spin around him as he absorbed the reality unfolding before their eyes. Is that... It can't be, Ethan stammered, leaning closer, his face pale. Jake's breath hitched in his throat as he watched the two of them share a laugh, the intimacy of the moment slicing through him like a knife. Look at them, Jake said, his voice rising with anger. They think they're so clever. The footage continued to roll, and Jake felt a mix of fury and betrayal swelling inside him. Mark leaned in, whispering something into Sarah's ear that made her blush, the sight igniting a firestorm of rage within him. I can't believe this is happening, he breathed, barely able to contain himself. Ethan broke the silence. What do we do now? We have to show your mom. Jake's brow furrowed. Yeah, but how? She's in love with him. She'll never believe us without proof. He paused, thinking about how to present the evidence. We need to make it undeniable. A plan began to form in his mind. He would compile the most damning footage into a montage that would leave no room for denial. Jake's resolve hardened as he envisioned the confrontation. Tonight, during dinner, I'll show them both. It's time they face the truth. As the day wore on, Jake felt a storm brewing inside him. The weight of the secret he had been carrying pressed heavily against his chest. The thought of confronting Mark and his mother filled him with dread, but it was a necessary step. He had to expose the deception that had infiltrated their lives. That evening, the family gathered around the dinner table, the atmosphere thick with unspoken words. Jake's heart raced as he set the laptop at the edge of the table, hidden from view. He could feel Mark's eyes on him, assessing, as if he sensed something was off. Linda chatted away, oblivious to the turmoil swirling beneath the surface. Jake, how was school today? She asked, her voice light. Fine, he replied curtly, his mind racing. He could hardly focus on the mundane conversation about homework and upcoming exams. Instead, he plotted his next move, the anticipation twisting in his stomach. As the meal progressed, Jake felt the tension rise. Mark was particularly charming, laughing and making jokes, but Jake could see through the facade. He needed to unravel it. With a deep breath, he decided it was time to act. Mom, can I show you something after dinner? Mark's eyes narrowed, a shadow crossing his face. What's this about, Jake? He asked, feigning innocence. Jake's heart raced as he replied, just something important. Linda looked from Mark to Jake, concern etched on her face. Is everything all right, honey? Yeah, everything's fine. Just trust me. Dinner concluded, and as the dishes were cleared away, Jake's determination solidified. He opened the laptop and faced his mother and Mark. I need you both to watch this, he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. Before he could hit play, Mark leaned forward. Jake, whatever you think you've seen, you need to let it go. It's not what you think. The air crackled with tension. You don't get to silence me anymore, Jake shot back, his anger boiling over. I have proof. Mark's composure faltered, a flicker of anxiety crossing his features. This is all fabricated, Jake. You're just trying to stir up trouble. Jake pressed play, the screen illuminating the dark secret that had been hidden from him for too long. As the images of Mark and Sarah unfolded, Jake watched his mother's face drain of color. Mark's bravado crumbled, revealing the man Jake had come to resent. Linda, I can explain, Mark stammered, but Jake could see the truth dawning in his mother's eyes, a mix of shock and betrayal. Mom, please let this sink in. He's been lying to you. To us. But before Linda could respond, Mark interjected. Jake, you don't understand. This is all a mistake. Enough. Jake shouted, the weight of betrayal crashing down around him. In that moment, he realized that the truth could tear them all apart, and the fear of what lay ahead loomed larger than ever. The evening after the dinner was a haze of confusion and hurt. I paced around my room, my mind racing, replaying every moment. The way Mark had smiled, the way he had looked at my mother with that disarming charm while denying everything. It made me feel sick. I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something much more sinister beneath the surface. That's when I remembered Mark's study. The thought of searching it again filled me with dread and a sliver of hope. Maybe there was something, anything, that could unravel the web of lies he'd spun around us. I slipped quietly down the hallway, careful not to wake my mother. The house was eerily silent, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for the truth to come out. I reached the study door, feeling the cold brass doorknob against my palm as I turned it. The room was dimly lit by a desk lamp, casting shadows that danced along the walls. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I might find. As I rifled through the papers on Mark's desk, my heart raced. Then, beneath a stack of bills, I spotted a manila envelope. My fingers trembled as I opened it, revealing a letter that sent chills down my spine. It was addressed to Sarah. Mark had been blackmailing her, threatening to expose her secrets if she ever dared to tell anyone about their affair. I could hardly believe it. The very idea that Mark had manipulated her like that, turning her into a pawn in his games, made my blood boil. I had to talk to Sarah. I needed to confront her and understand how deep this betrayal ran. I grabbed my phone and texted her, asking to meet at the park where we used to hang out as kids. It felt surreal. I was summoning the courage to confront the woman I once thought was just a shadowy figure in Mark's life. But now she was a potential ally in my quest for the truth. When Sarah arrived, her eyes were puffy and red. She looked fragile, like she might crumble at any moment. "Jake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think you'd reach out." "Sarah, I found a letter in Mark's study. He's been blackmailing you," I said, urgency lacing my words. "You have to tell me everything." She looked down, tears welling up in her eyes. I didn't want to believe it, but he threatened me. He said if I ever said a word, he would ruin me. I thought I could handle it alone. Handle what? The affair or the threats? I pressed, feeling the weight of her silence. "Both," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I thought I could keep Mark under control, but he's a monster. He knows things about me that no one else does. I was scared of what he'd do if I spoke out. I felt a mix of anger and sympathy. He's using you, Sarah. We need to expose him. We can't let him do this anymore." She nodded, wiping her tears. "You're right. I can't let him control me anymore. I'll help you. But we need proof. We need to catch him in the act." As we plotted our next steps, a sense of purpose ignited within me. I had someone on my side, someone who understood the depth of Mark's treachery. We spent the next hour discussing a plan, determining how best to gather evidence against Mark without alerting him to our intentions. Just as I felt a flicker of hope, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket, cutting through the tense atmosphere. I pulled it out to read a text message from an unknown number. My heart sank as I read the words, "Linda knows about Mark's affair. She's known for a while. You have no idea what you're up against." The blood drained from my face. How could she? My mind spun in circles, trying to process the implications. My mother, the one person I thought would stand by me, had been complicit in this entire charade. I stared at the screen, feeling the world around me collapse. All this time, I thought I was fighting for her, for us, only to realize that I was fighting against her too. "Jake, what is it?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking through my haze. I looked up, my heart heavy with betrayal and confusion. "My mom, she knows." The weight of those words settled like a brick in my stomach, and I wondered how deep this betrayal truly ran. Would it ever end?